Okay, folks, what I have here today is the Bancroft 1/200 scale, ready to run remote control model of the Imperial Japanese Navy battleship Yamato. It's just over 52 inches in length, a little bit shorter than Titanic. It's an impressive kit, a ton of detail, beautifully done. And we're going to do an unboxing today. Go over some stuff from the kit, my initial impressions. It's a gorgeous model. The rigging's very nice. Naturally, it's a warship, so there's not as much rigging as you might find on the Titanic, but it's an impressive model. And it's on sale now at Motion RC. And I recommend, if you're interested, picking her up. A little bit about the Yamato here. There was 2 of these built. They were super heavy battleships for the Japanese Navy. About 860 feet long. The width, 127 feet. And a draft, which is this red area of the hull here, that was in excess of 36 feet. She weighed 72,000 tons. Had 9 18.1 inch, 460 millimeter main battery naval guns, which is what you see here. Each one of these barrels weighed about 145 tons. It was 70 feet in length and capable of firing a 18.1 inch projectile. And here's a picture of what that looks like. Could fire that 3,200 pound projectile in excess of 25 miles, but with an effective range of about 16 miles, which is still, in naval terms, it's 32,000 yards. That's still pretty far away. She had numerous anti-aircraft guns, and her secondary guns, which were the ones you see here and here, they were 155 millimeter. She had a combination of 127 millimeter, 25 millimeter guns. Right now, this is actually this version of Yamato here is in her late 1945 retrofit, or refit, sorry, not retrofit, where she was outfitted with more anti-aircraft armament to try and counter American-based carrier aviation, which was just dominant in the Pacific at that time. So she saw service, naturally, in World War II, and she was sunk in April of 1945 during Operation Tango, where she was attacked by numerous aircraft from U.S. carriers over the course of 2 hours. Took about 11 torpedoes, 6 bombs, and eventually succumbed to the onslaught, which put a lot of effort actually into killing and strafing the men that manned the anti-aircraft guns here on the superstructure. So, impressive ship. Give you an idea, her main belt armor was 16 inches, and the faceplate of these turrets was 25 inches thick. So, an impressive model, beautiful. We'll have to wait for some better weather to ballast her out and take her out on a maiden, get her in the lake. But it's just an incredible model. All right, let's get into the unboxing. Okay, this is how the Bancroft Yamato comes shipped to you. Standard package, similar to what the Titanic was shipped in. The top portion of the box will separate, revealing the internals, and we'll take a look and see how it's packed and if there's any shipping damage. These boxes are kind of easy to hold on to as well. We just throw them up in the attic and keep them with all the shipping material in case you got to move in the future. All right, once we've removed the tape and taken the top box off, it reveals our Yamato. So kind of similar to the Titanic, floating on styrofoam shipping bulkheads, rigging not fully assembled, just floating in the box. Looks like our receiver is here, and if I'm not mistaken, I've already removed the tape here. This is the turrets that I will have to attach separately. Pretty neat. So this lifts out itself here. It's its own styrofoam box, and there's the bow. All right, let's go ahead and get this out of the box sitting on the table and continue. So as you might have gathered from watching my Bancroft video on the Titanic, I'm pretty cautious when I try and unpack these, and I always just kind of experiment a little bit to see how the system of packing kind of reacts to my movement, because there's a lot of delicate fine detail pieces on the model. There's also there's parts where the rigging runs through the styrofoam. So I want to make sure before I make any major movements with the model that I don't unintentionally break something. So something I picked up on here is there's these cross members in the front. This one easily came out, right? No problem, which would allow for the front hull to come clear. But this one looks like it's kind of glued in. And that's also looks like it's attached here, glued to this piece that's under the bow. So if I go to lift the model, I might break that small little flagpole that's in the front by impacting here. So I'm just going to separate this out, and then I should just be able to reach my hands up underneath the sides of the model, lift the ship itself, and let that carry the styrofoam out, so therefore I don't damage any of the rigging or any of the smaller fine details on the model. So that's the only adjustment right now that I could see that really you might need to be cautious about. So I'm going to actually take a knife and actually cut this away here. There might just be a little glue in there, so that this free space can allow these bulkheads just to lift out with the model. All right, so I've cut away that cross member, and my lift points are going to be my hand right underneath the bow here, and I'm going to reach underneath, being careful not to hit these anti-aircraft guns here on the back. I'm just going to reach underneath here, and two hands lift the whole model out. If you're not comfortable doing that, well, it's no big deal to just cut the sides of these boxes here and here, which you could later tape up and still save your packaging for moving, and then you could just flap this down like a door and just shift the whole model out. All right, here we go. Okay, here it is, just outside the box, floating on those shipping bulkheads. And similar to the Titanic's model, you can kind of see there's a separation in these shipping bulkheads, but they are not taped together. So caution, you're going to have to support the stern and the bow to remove those from the model without unnecessarily dropping it. You can see it's not as sturdy as the Titanic shipping is as far as how it can hold the hull up. So just be cautious taking these bulkheads off that you don't drop the model. Something you'll have to account for before you separate the model from these shipping bulkheads is the rigging is worked through them. So I'm going to take the time prior to pulling these bulkheads off. I'm going to build the stand so that I could place the model on the stand. I'm going to pull the rigging out of this styrofoam very gently. Runs around in a loop, comes back over to here, and have that just sitting to the side so that I could just pull these out and away from the model. Okay, here we are with Yamato out of its shipping container, sitting on the supplied stand. You just have to cut out some notches like an old plastic kit basically and break it out, and it assembles by hand. And here it is out of the box, just sitting on a stand. I've already started to play around with some of the rigging, get that adjusted. And my next step is going to be working in installing the turrets, the aft crane, and the rudder servo cover, which goes over on the back over here. There's access points basically. It's a hollow barbette for turret 3 for access to the rudder servo, and that's the rudder throw that's back there on the back of the stern. The rigging's meant to terminate at the end of these posts at the bow and at the stern, but they're not very strong. So for example, here on the bow, I've
I've affixed mine a little bit lower, closer to the tripod there, because I figure that'll just stand the test of time a little bit better than at the top here, because you could see this is it's got some flexibility into that, and that just wants to snap, in my opinion. I say give that to an 8-year-old, and that'll last about 10 minutes. Okay, I'll keep putting it together. All right, here's an initial look at her all assembled, and right off the bat, I gotta say it's a gorgeous model. A lot of detail, a lot of attention to detail. Not as much rigging as, let's say, like the Titanic, but like the attention to detail in the rigging is really, really there. It's nicely put together. I have no shipping damage. I'm not missing any parts. So whatever corrections they've made, because apparently the model had a history of that, like the previous, I guess, run that got sent to Motion RC, it seems to be addressed. I have not found any parts in the box, nor have I identified any missing, like anti-aircraft or smaller, finer details on the model. So here it is. Yeah, all turrets in place. This turret, it has to be removed in order to pull the superstructure off to access the innards of the model. And you'll have to detach the aft rigging, which I've run down the top of the crane here onto that mezzanine, basically that anti-aircraft mezzanine at the back flag post. I gotta figure out probably something better for that, because that's be a frequently operated part. And then coming over to the bow, that's easy enough, right? Just pull it right off of that flagpole. So you could just gently set aside the superstructure and get a look at them at the inside of the ship, which is the next part we'll take a look at and film. Just by looking at the access to the hull, this one's going to be a little bit trickier to ballast, because it doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of space here, even though it's wide, to put what's undoubtedly going to be, I'm going to assume, more weight than what the Titanic will require. So probably in excess of 10 pounds of ballast, and to spread it out evenly so that it's not too high a center of gravity. So that might get a little tricky. Okay. Okay. So I've pulled the superstructure off, and as you can see, it's pretty tight to get ballast in here. And we got our 4 motors. Again, Bancroft doesn't use like a gearbox assembly with one like can-driven motor driving them. So there is some variation in the shaft RPM I've noticed. I noticed that on Titanic, which actually I have right next to this for size comparison. I'll show that in another video. Actually in the next section, but you can see in here it's pretty tight. It's going to need a lot of weight because it's a pretty wide hull, and there's room to tuck some weight up in that long nose, but you can see there's a way to go in order to get it to sit right on a forward-aft trim basis. But it's a pretty tight compartment in here. But doesn't look any real different other than the configuration, obviously, for 4 screws versus 3. So just gonna have to take my time and build up a ballast pile, basically get as much weight as I can forward, and then pack as much weight as I can here in the center. What's nice about this hull though is it's nice and wide, so I can afford a little bit of a higher stack of weight in there without losing a lot of stability on this model. Yep, albeit I am in a separate room for this, but here's my 1/200th Bancroft Yamato, assembled right next to Titanic. And those dimensions are pretty good, actually. You know, Titanic should be just slightly longer at 883 feet vice. I'm forgetting off the top of my head what Yamato was. I'll get those numbers, but I want to say she was around like 860. I mean, naturally a big difference in the beam, right? 90 feet versus 127 feet. So, but it's there. Very good representations of both ships. I'll give you an idea. If you have multiple 1/200s, they're spot on. pretty good looking.